Welcome back to the channel, Coin Hunters and Collectors. Today, we are going on an exciting journey through the world of the United States Jefferson nickel, the famous 5-cent coin featuring Thomas Jefferson and Monticello. But this is not just a story about ordinary pocket change. Today, we are looking at 4 Jefferson nickel issues that can become highly desirable collector coins because of their low mintages, unusual varieties, scarce mint marks, exceptional condition, or extraordinary strike quality. Before we begin, there is one very important lesson about coin values. A Jefferson nickel is not automatically worth thousands of dollars simply because it is old. The enormous prices you may hear about generally belong to exceptional certified examples, unusual varieties, or coins in extraordinary grades. Auction records from PCGS show just how dramatic the difference can be. For example, PCGS records a $33,600 auction result for a 1938 D Jefferson nickel graded MS-68 plus full steps, while other important Jefferson nickel varieties have also reached tens of thousands of dollars. So, as you watch this video, remember that the value ranges we discuss are based on specific high-quality or special examples. Your circulated coin may be worth much less. The real excitement comes from learning how to recognize the features that separate an ordinary nickel from a truly special numismatic specimen. Let's get started first of the 1970 D Jefferson nickel, a 5-cent United States coin struck at the Denver Mint and identified by the small d mint mark beneath the date. The coin we are discussing today is described as being in very fine condition, meaning it has experienced circulation and shows noticeable wear, but important design details remain visible. Before getting excited about enormous price claims, however, there is an important fact every collector should understand. A normal circulated 1970 D Jefferson nickel is generally a common coin and usually trades close to face value. NGC currently describes the circulated 1970 Jefferson nickels as generally worth around 10 to 20 cents, while higher prices are associated primarily with uncirculated examples. So why should collectors pay attention to this coin? The answer is that condition, strike quality, errors, varieties, and especially exceptional mint state examples can dramatically change the value of a Jefferson nickel. The 1970 D issue has a particularly interesting story when it comes to full steps on Monticello. That is where an ordinary 5-cent coin can become a much more exciting numismatic discovery. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel. The design was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, with Thomas Jefferson appearing on the obverse and his famous home, Monticello, appearing on the reverse. The design became one of the longest-running coin designs in American history. By 1970, the Jefferson nickel had already been in production for more than 3 decades. The 1970 D nickel was produced at the Denver Mint, and the D Mint mark identifies its place of manufacture. According to PCGS and other numismatic references, the 1970 D Jefferson nickel had a mintage of approximately 515,485,380 pieces, making it far from a low mintage issue. The coin was made from the standard copper-nickel composition used for Jefferson nickels during this period, approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs about 5 grams, measures approximately 21.2 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. That large production number is extremely important. A coin cannot be considered rare simply because it is old. Millions of 1970 D nickels were produced, and many survived. Therefore, a circulated example in very fine condition should not automatically be described as a rare or extremely valuable coin. But coin collecting is not only about mintage. Sometimes the most interesting opportunities come from condition rarity and special strike characteristics. Let's start with the obverse. The front of the 1970 D Jefferson nickel features the left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Around the portrait are the inscriptions Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and the date 1970. The small d mint mark appears below the date, identifying the Denver Mint as the facility that produced the coin. One interesting detail for collectors is the designer's initials, FS, located below Jefferson's bust. These initials identify Felix Schlag, the artist responsible for the Jefferson nickel design. Now turn the coin over, and you will see the famous image of Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate. The words Monticello appear directly beneath the building, followed by 5 cents, while E pluribus unum and United States of America complete the reverse design. For a very fine example, collectors should carefully inspect the building, lettering, pillars, and other architectural details. Circulation where will normally soften the highest points of the design, but the major features should remain recognizable. And here comes one of the most important details for this particular date, the steps of Monticello. Collectors sometimes look for Jefferson nickels with exceptionally sharp, uninterrupted steps on Monticello. These coins may receive a full steps, or FS, designation from professional grading services when the required details are sufficiently complete. The 1970D is especially interesting in this area. PCGS describes full steps examples of the 1970D nickel as extremely rare, with only a very small number certified. However, there is a major distinction here. A circulated very fine 1970D nickel should not normally be expected to qualify as a valuable full steps coin. Full steps premiums are primarily associated with coins retaining exceptionally strong mint state detail. In other words, if your 1970D nickel is genuinely very fine and circulated, its value is normally modest. If you discover a previously overlooked high-grade example with extraordinary step detail, that is a completely different situation. This is where the story becomes especially interesting. The 1970D Jefferson nickel itself is not rare in circulated condition. With a mintage of more than 515 million pieces, collectors can still encounter these coins in circulation, old collections, rolls, jars, and accumulations of American change. PCGS specifically describes the regular 1970D nickel as common across grades, while emphasizing that full steps examples are exceptionally scarce. That means the rarity story depends heavily on exactly what kind of coin you have. A normal very fine coin has ordinary collector appeal. A sharply struck, uncirculated example can be more desirable. A top-grade certified example can become considerably more valuable. And an exceptional full steps example can enter an entirely different category. According to PCGS, its population information for the full steps variety indicates very limited survival at high grades, with the finest listed PCGS example being an MS65 full steps coin. This is a perfect example of why collectors should never judge a coin's value only by its age or face value. A 1970 nickel may be more than half a century old, but age alone does not make it rare. What matters is the combination of date, mint mark, condition, strike quality, preservation, variety, errors, and verified market demand. Now let's talk about the question that every coin hunter wants answered. How much could a 1970D Jefferson nickel be worth today? For the specific coin described in this video, a 1970D Jefferson nickel in very fine condition, expectations should remain realistic. Published price guides indicate that circulated examples generally have very modest values. USA Coin Book's listing for the issue shows the coin at the lower end of the market in circulated grades and higher values beginning with uncirculated preservation. Another current market reference lists the 1970D at approximately face value levels in circulated grades, with values rising as the coin enters mint state. So a normal very fine 1970D nickel is not realistically a thousands of dollars coin simply because it is from 1970. Its ordinary value may be only a small amount above its 5-cent face value, depending on the exact grade, eye appeal, dealer market, and buyer demand. But here is the exciting part. The same date becomes much more interesting in exceptional mint state condition. PCGS records an auction result of $719 for a 1970D Jefferson nickel graded MS67, sold by Heritage Auctions in 2005. PCGS's auction price data also records a $1,208 auction result for a 1970D full steps Jefferson nickel graded MS64, demonstrating how dramatically a rare strike designation can change the market for the same basic date and mint mark. This is an extremely important lesson for viewers. The high auction record belongs to a special high-grade example, not to every 1970D nickel. Therefore, if you are holding an ordinary very fine 1970D nickel, don't assume it is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. But don't throw it away either. Examine it carefully, because unusual errors, varieties, or an incorrectly assessed condition could potentially make a coin more interesting. And if you believe your coin is much sharper than very fine, professional grading may be worth considering before making any major valuation claim. When examining your 1970 Jefferson nickel, begin with the date and mint mark. Make sure the coin actually reads 1970 and that the mint mark below the date is a clear D. Next, inspect the surfaces under good lighting. Look for unusual doubling, off-center striking, missing design elements, die cracks, clips, planchet problems, or other abnormalities. Do not assume that every unusual-looking mark is an error. Damage caused after the coin left the mint is extremely common. Then examine the reverse. Look carefully at Monticello and especially the steps. If the coin is circulated and graded around very fine, substantial where will normally be present. But if the coin somehow appears dramatically sharper than expected, that deserves closer investigation. Also pay attention to cleaning. A coin that has been aggressively cleaned may look bright, but cleaning can reduce collector appeal and potentially hurt its value. Original surfaces are generally preferred by serious collectors. If you believe you have an unusually high-grade specimen, consider submitting it to a reputable professional grading service. A certified grade can provide an independent assessment of the coin's condition and, when applicable, an important designation such as full steps. The auction market demonstrates an important principle in coin collecting. One date can have completely different values depending on quality and rarity. A normal circulated 1970 Jefferson nickel may be worth only a small premium over face value. Meanwhile, a spectacular mint state example with superior preservation can bring hundreds of dollars, and exceptional full steps examples can attract significantly greater attention. That difference explains why experienced collectors examine coins that other people might casually overlook. The 1970 nickel is particularly fascinating because its full steps population is extremely limited. PCGS states that full steps examples are very rare, with only a handful of certified pieces. This does not mean every 1970 nickel is a hidden fortune. Instead, it means that condition rarity and strike quality are the real stories behind the coin's strongest auction potential. For a YouTube coin hunting audience, this is perhaps the most valuable lesson of all. Don't search only for old dates. Search for unusual combinations of date, mint mark, condition, strike, and variety. If you find a 1970 Jefferson nickel, handle it carefully. Hold it by the edges rather than touching the main surfaces with your fingers. Natural oils and dirt can affect the appearance of collectible coins. Never clean the coin with household chemicals, polish, toothpaste, metal cleaner, or abrasive materials. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and may make the coin less desirable to collectors. Use a good magnifying glass or a loupe to examine the date, mint mark, lettering, Monticello steps, and overall surfaces. Compare your coin with reliable photographs from professional grading services. Most importantly, learn the difference between face value, catalog value, retail asking price, and actual auction realization. A seller may advertise a coin for a huge amount, but that does not prove that collectors are actually paying that amount. For genuinely valuable coins, documented auction results and professional certification provide much stronger evidence than an unsupported online listing. And remember, if your 1970 nickel is truly very fine and circulated, the realistic expectation is a modest value. The dramatic prices associated with this date generally involve much higher grades, exceptional strike quality, full steps characteristics, or unusual varieties and errors. So, coin hunters, the 1970 Jefferson nickel is a fascinating example of how the coin market really works. It was produced in large numbers at the Denver Mint, with a reported mintage of more than 515 million coins, so the ordinary circulated example is not a great rarity. A very fine example is generally worth only a modest amount, and collectors should be cautious about exaggerated claims that every 1970 nickel is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. But this coin has a fascinating hidden story. The strongest collector interest comes from exceptional preservation and especially the rare full steps characteristic on Monticello. PCGS has documented the extreme scarcity of full steps examples, while auction records show that exceptional 1970 nickels have achieved prices far above face value. So the next time you see a Jefferson nickel from 1970, don't immediately dismiss it as just another 5-cent coin. Check the date. Check the D-mint mark. Examine the surfaces. Study Monticello. Look closely at the steps. And most importantly, understand the difference between an ordinary circulated example and a truly exceptional collector specimen. You never know what might be hiding in an old coin collection, a roll of nickels, or a forgotten jar of change. If you enjoyed this coin hunting journey, make sure to stay connected with the channel for more fascinating United States coins, rare dates, mint marks, condition varieties, and real-world auction information. Keep searching, keep learning, and always examine your coins carefully before spending them. Next up, the 1980 Jefferson nickel, a 5-cent coin featuring the famous Monticello design and the portrait of Thomas Jefferson. This particular example is described as being in worn condition, meaning it has circulated and shows visible signs of use. At first glance, a worn 1980 nickel might look like an ordinary 5-cent coin, but there is an important story behind this date that every collector should know. The first thing we need to understand is that not every old-looking Jefferson nickel is automatically rare or worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The 1980 issue was produced in a very large quantity, and ordinary circulated examples generally have little premium over their 5-cent face value. Numismatic references list the 1980 mintage at approximately 502,323,448 coins, so the regular circulated issue is not considered a scarce coin. However, the story becomes much more interesting when we move from ordinary circulated coins into exceptional condition. High-grade examples, especially coins with sharply defined full steps on Monticello, can attract serious collector attention. In fact, PCGS records an auction result of $3,120 for a 1980 Jefferson nickel graded MS-66 full steps, sold by Stack's Bowers in August 2021. So, could your worn 1980 nickel be a fortune? Probably not as an ordinary circulated coin, but understanding what separates a common example from a valuable one is exactly what makes coin hunting so exciting. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938 to replace the Buffalo nickel. The design was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, and it placed Thomas Jefferson on the obverse while showing his Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. By 1980, the Jefferson nickel had been part of American coinage for more than 4 decades. The coin was still being produced with the traditional copper-nickel composition, consisting of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. It has a standard weight of about 5 grams, a diameter of approximately 21.2 millimeters, and a plain edge. The D-mint mark identifies the Denver Mint. On this era of Jefferson nickel, the mint mark is found on the obverse, underneath the date. That small letter can be extremely important when collectors compare coins from different mints. The 1980 issue was struck in enormous numbers. Numista lists a mintage of approximately 502.3 million pieces, which immediately tells us that the ordinary 1980 nickel is not rare merely because it is more than 4 decades old. This is one of the most important lessons in coin collecting. Age and rarity are not the same thing. A coin can be old and common, while another coin from a similar year can be scarce because very few survived in exceptional condition. Now let's take a closer look at the design. On the obverse, we see the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson facing left. The inscriptions include "I in God we trust," "Liberty," and the date 1980. Directly beneath the date is the small D mint mark, confirming that this nickel was struck at the Denver Mint. Collectors should examine the date carefully because worn coins can sometimes have weak or partially obscured details. The mint mark should also be checked carefully, especially if the coin has heavy circulation wear or environmental damage. Below Jefferson's portrait are the initials FS, representing designer Felix Schlag. These initials became part of the design beginning in the 1960s and are now an interesting detail for collectors examining Jefferson nickels. Turn the coin over, and the famous Monticello building dominates the reverse. Above it are the inscriptions United States of America and E Pluribus Unum, while Monticello and 5 cents appear beneath the building. For collectors, one of the most important features is the set of horizontal steps at the entrance of Monticello. On exceptionally well-struck Jefferson nickels, these steps can remain sharply separated and uninterrupted. Such coins may qualify for a full steps, or FS, designation when they meet the requirements of a professional grading service. This is where the 1980D becomes particularly interesting. PCGS lists a separate 1980D full steps variety and shows substantially higher values for high-grade FS examples compared with ordinary mint state coins. But there is an important warning for today's coin. If your 1980D nickel is genuinely worn and circulated, the steps will normally show considerable wear. A circulated coin should not be valued as though it were an MS-66 full step specimen. Now let's talk about rarity. The ordinary 1980D Jefferson nickel is not rare in circulated condition. More than 500 million were produced, and many examples survived. Namista's catalog data shows the enormous production figure, while current market references show very low values for circulated pieces. So why do collectors still pay attention to the 1980D? The answer is condition rarity. Although millions of coins were made, far fewer survive today with outstanding surfaces, strong strikes, minimal marks, and complete Monticello steps. The higher the grade, the more selective collectors become. This is why an ordinary worn 1980D nickel and a superbly preserved 1980D full steps nickel can have completely different values. PCGS's auction records demonstrate this difference dramatically. One 1980D MS-64 example sold for only $17, while a much rarer MS-66 full steps example achieved $3,120. That does not mean the worn coin in your hand is worth $3,120. Instead, it demonstrates how dramatically grade and strike quality can change the market. For collectors, this makes the 1980D an excellent date to study. It teaches us that the important question is not simply, what year is this coin? The better question is, what exact condition, strike, variety, and preservation does this coin have? Now we reach the part everyone wants to hear. What is the 1980D Jefferson nickel worth today? For a normal worn or circulated 1980D Jefferson nickel, the value is generally very small. Current references show circulated examples at or only slightly above face value. Namista's listed values for the issue range from roughly 6 cents to around 80 cents, depending on grade and condition, while Gainesville Coins describes circulated 1980 Jefferson nickels generally at face value. That means if your 1980D nickel is heavily worn, scratched, stained, or simply well circulated, it should not realistically be advertised as a hundreds or thousands of dollars coin. But the market changes dramatically when we enter high mint state grades. PCGS's current price information lists the ordinary 1980D mint state issue at modest values in lower grades, while the full steps version can command considerably higher amounts in premium grades. The most impressive documented auction example is the MS-66 Full Steps 1980D Jefferson nickel that sold for $3,120 in August 2021. PCGS identifies this as the auction record for that particular certified category. This is an excellent example of the difference between auction potential and ordinary market value. A worn 1980D nickel could be worth only around face value or a small premium, while an exceptional certified full steps example can enter the hundreds or even thousands of dollars. Therefore, if your coin is worn, keep your expectations realistic. The big money story applies to exceptional specimens, not every 1980D nickel. What makes a 1980D nickel more valuable? There are several characteristics collectors should investigate. First is condition. The fewer signs of circulation and damage a coin has, the higher its potential grade can be. Second is strike quality. Jefferson nickels are often evaluated closely for the sharpness of Monticello's architectural details, especially the steps. Third is full steps. This designation can dramatically increase collector interest when the coin is also in a high grade. The 1980D full steps market demonstrates just how valuable exceptional examples can become. PCGS currently lists an auction record of $3,120 for an MS-66 FS specimen. Fourth is surface quality. Collectors look for clean, original surfaces without excessive scratches, stains, polishing, or harsh cleaning. Finally, unusual mint errors or varieties can potentially make an individual coin more interesting. But collectors should be careful here. A scratch, dent, corrosion spot, or damage caused after leaving the mint is not automatically a valuable mint error. If you have a worn 1980D Jefferson nickel, the first thing you should do is inspect the coin under good lighting. Check the date and make sure the mint mark is actually a D beneath the date. Next, examine the obverse and reverse for unusual characteristics. Look for possible doubling, unusual die cracks, clips, off-center striking, or other genuine mint-made abnormalities. On the reverse, look closely at Monticello. Even though a worn coin will normally have weak steps, it is still worth examining the overall strike and design details. Do not clean the coin. This is extremely important. Many people believe that making an old coin shiny will make it more valuable, but the opposite can happen. Abrasive cleaning, polishing, chemicals, and scratching can permanently damage the coin's original surfaces and reduce collector appeal. If you believe you have an unusually sharp example, compare it with authenticated photographs from professional grading services. If the coin appears to have exceptional mint state quality, professional certification may be worth considering. For a heavily worn example, however, professional grading is usually not economical because the grading cost could exceed the coin's market value. Another excellent habit is to compare actual auction results, rather than relying on sensational online advertisements. An asking price of $1,000 does not mean someone actually paid $1,000. A documented auction result provides much stronger evidence of what collectors have actually been willing to pay. The auction market for the 1980D Jefferson nickel gives us a fascinating lesson. PCGS records a $17 sale for an MS-64 example, showing that not every uncirculated coin is automatically extremely valuable. But the market becomes much more competitive for exceptional full steps examples. The MS-66 full steps specimen sold for $3,120, and PCGS identifies that sale as the auction record for the 1980D MS category. This huge difference is precisely why experienced collectors search through old collections, rolls, and accumulations of Jefferson nickels. They are not necessarily looking for a worn coin that is already worth thousands of dollars. They are looking for the unusual coin that has escaped attention because it looks ordinary at first glance. That is the excitement of coin collecting. The possibility of finding an exceptional strike, a rare variety, or an unusually high-grade specimen makes even a common date worth examining carefully. So, coin hunters, what should we remember about the 1980D Jefferson nickel? The ordinary worn example is not a rare coin simply because it is from 1980. More than 502 million were struck at Denver, and circulated examples generally remain close to face value. But the story changes when we find a coin with exceptional preservation and a strong strike. The Monticello steps are especially important. High-grade full steps examples are much scarcer, and documented auction results show just how dramatically the value can rise. One exceptional 1980D MS-66 full steps nickel brought $3,120 at auction in 2021. So if your 1980D Jefferson nickel is worn, don't expect a fortune, but don't overlook it either. Check the date, confirm the D mint mark, study the surfaces, examine Monticello, and learn how professional grading works. And remember, the most important lesson is this: a coin's value is determined by rarity, condition, strike quality, demand, and documented market evidence, not simply by its age. If you enjoyed this Jefferson nickel story, stay connected with the channel for more United States coin discoveries, rare dates, mint marks, varieties, condition grades, and auction market stories. Keep searching your old coins, keep learning the details, and always look twice before spending an interesting nickel. Next up, the 1997D Jefferson nickel, featuring the famous Monticello design and the portrait of Thomas Jefferson. At first glance, a 1997D Jefferson nickel may look like an ordinary 5-cent coin. And in most cases, that is exactly what it is. The 1997D had a large mintage of approximately 466,640,000 coins, so the ordinary circulated issue is not considered rare simply because of its date. But there is another side to this story. Certain exceptionally preserved 1997D Jefferson nickels, particularly coins with the full steps designation on Monticello, are much more difficult to find in top grades. PCGS describes the 1997D as a challenging modern Jefferson nickel in MS-66 full steps and higher, and its auction records show that an exceptional MS-67 full steps example brought approximately $3,250. That is why today's coin is worth examining carefully. The important question is not simply whether the coin says 1997D. The real question is, what condition is it in, how strong is the strike, and does it have any special characteristics that collectors are willing to pay for? The Jefferson nickel was first introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel as America's 5-cent coin. The design was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, who placed a portrait of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his famous Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. By 1997, the Jefferson nickel had already been part of American coinage for nearly 60 years. The basic design remained familiar to generations of Americans, making the Jefferson nickel one of the most recognizable coins in United States history. The 1997 D was struck at the Denver Mint, identified by the small letter D on the obverse beneath the date. According to PCGS and USA Coin Book, the coin has a mintage of approximately 466.64 million pieces. It consists of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel, weighs 5 grams, and measures approximately 21.2 millimeters in diameter. Because so many were produced, the ordinary 1997 D should not be described as a rare coin merely because it is nearly 30 years old. Millions of examples survived, and many remain in collections, coin jars, rolls, and old accumulations. However, coin collecting is much more complicated than simply counting how many coins were originally struck. What really matters can be the number of coins surviving in exceptional condition. Let's begin with the obverse, or front, of the coin. The central design is the familiar left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Above and around his portrait are the inscriptions, "I in God we trust," "Liberty," and the date 1997. Directly beneath the date is the small D mint mark, which tells us that this particular nickel was produced at the Denver Mint. When examining your coin, make sure the mint mark is clearly visible and correctly positioned. Another interesting detail is the small FS initials beneath Jefferson's portrait. These initials represent Felix Schlag, the designer of the Jefferson nickel. Now turn the coin over, and you will see the famous image of Monticello, Jefferson's estate in Virginia. The reverse includes United States of America, E pluribus unum, Monticello, and 5 cents. For collectors, one of the most important areas on the reverse is the series of steps beneath Monticello. On exceptionally well-struck Jefferson nickels, these steps can remain remarkably sharp and complete. Coins meeting the appropriate standards may receive a full steps, or FS, designation from a professional grading service. This is particularly important for the 1997 D. PCGS states that the 1997 D Jefferson nickel is very scarce in MS-66 full steps, with fewer than a couple hundred known according to its analysis, and even scarcer in MS-67 full steps, with fewer than a handful known. But there is a major distinction for today's example. A coin described as fine condition has circulated and experienced significant wear. It should not be confused with the spectacular mint state, full steps coins responsible for the highest auction prices. Now let's talk about rarity. The normal 1997 D Jefferson nickel is not rare in circulated condition. With a reported mintage of 466,640,000, there are still substantial numbers of these coins available. So why does the 1997 D receive attention from collectors? The answer is condition rarity. There are millions of ordinary examples, but there are far fewer coins that have survived with extraordinary preservation and exceptional strikes. The full steps characteristic is especially important because many Jefferson nickels do not have perfectly defined steps on Monticello. PCGS specifically identifies the 1997 D as one of the tougher modern-date Jefferson nickels in MS-66, full steps, and higher. This creates an interesting contrast. Your fine condition 1997 D may be relatively common, while an exceptional MS-66 or MS-67 full steps example can be genuinely scarce. That difference is one of the most important concepts for anyone learning coin collecting. Rarity does not always come from the number originally produced. Sometimes rarity comes from how many coins survived in a particular condition. Collectors building complete Jefferson nickel sets may also want the 1997 D, But competition becomes much stronger when a coin combines the correct date and mint mark with a very high certified grade and full steps designation. Now we come to the question that every coin hunter wants answered. How much is a 1997 D Jefferson nickel worth? For the specific coin described in this video, a 1997 D in fine condition, the realistic value is modest. USA Coin Book's current value chart does not assign a separate premium value to the circulated fine and very fine grades, and instead shows values beginning around $1.24 for about uncirculated and $2.50 for MS60, based on its February 2026 update. Another market reference currently lists the 1997 D at approximately $1.79 ungraded, although actual prices vary according to condition, seller, buyer demand, and whether the coin is certified. So a normal fine condition 1997 D nickel should not realistically be advertised as a $500, $1,000, or $3,000 coin. But here is where the story becomes exciting. PCGS records an auction result of approximately $3,249.96 for a 1997 D Jefferson nickel, graded MS67 full steps, with the sale occurring in March 2018. PCGS's broader auction data also lists the 1997 D MS category with an auction record of about $3,249.96. This dramatic difference shows exactly why condition matters. A fine condition coin can be worth only a modest amount, while a spectacular certified full step specimen can bring thousands of dollars. Therefore, when discussing a 1997 D Jefferson nickel, it is essential to identify the grade before quoting a major dollar value. Imagine finding two 1997 D Jefferson nickels side by side. The first coin has been in circulation for years. It has noticeable wear, softened details, and the appearance of a typical fine condition coin. That coin is interesting historically, but its market value is generally modest. The second coin has never circulated in the traditional sense. It has brilliant original surfaces, sharp design details, minimal marks, and beautifully defined Monticello steps. A professional grading service examines it and assigns an extremely high grade with the full steps designation. Suddenly, the two coins that share the exact same date and mint mark can have completely different market values. That is the power of condition rarity. The documented $3,249.96 auction result for an MS67 full steps 1997 D is a real example of this phenomenon. However, collectors should never take that auction record and automatically apply it to a circulated fine condition coin. The auction record represents an extraordinary certified specimen, not the ordinary version found in circulation. This distinction is extremely important when making YouTube videos about coin values, because sensational price claims can easily mislead new collectors. If you have a 1997 D Jefferson nickel, start by checking the date and mint mark. Make sure the coin is actually dated 1997 and carries the D mint mark beneath the date. Next, examine the overall condition. A fine condition coin will show noticeable circulation wear, especially on Jefferson's portrait and the higher points of the design. Then turn the coin over and inspect Monticello. Look carefully at the building, columns, lettering, and especially the steps. A circulated fine condition coin will normally have significant wear on the steps. But if your coin appears far sharper than the grade you expected, take another look. Sometimes collectors underestimate the condition of coins they find. You should also examine the coin for possible mint-made errors. Look for unusual doubling, off-center strikes, clips, die cracks, or other characteristics that may indicate a genuine production error. Be careful, however, because damage after the coin left the mint is extremely common. Scratches, dents, corrosion, staining, and unusual marks do not automatically make a coin rare. One of the most important rules is simple: never clean your coin. Do not use metal polish, toothpaste, abrasive materials, chemicals, or household cleaning products. Cleaning can permanently alter the coin's surface and may make it less desirable to serious collectors. Instead, hold the coin by its edges and inspect it under good lighting. A magnifying glass or loupe can help you examine the date, mint mark, lettering, portrait, and Monticello steps. If your 1997 D is genuinely worn and fine, Professional grading will usually not make financial sense because grading fees can be much higher than the value of an ordinary circulated nickel. But if you discover a coin that appears exceptionally sharp and nearly uncirculated, professional certification may be worth investigating. A certified grade can establish the coin's condition and, where applicable, identify a full steps designation. Most importantly, research actual completed sales instead of relying on online asking prices. A seller can list a coin for $5,000, but that does not prove anyone is willing to pay $5,000. Documented auction results provide much stronger evidence of market value. The 1997 D. Jefferson nickel is a perfect example of why coin hunting can be so exciting. The ordinary coin is common. More than 466 million were produced. But the exceptional examples tell a completely different story. PCGS's research indicates that the 1997 D becomes particularly challenging in very high grades with full steps, especially MS66FS and MS67FS. And the documented auction result of nearly $3,250 for an MS67FS specimen proves that exceptional examples can attract serious money. That is why collectors should develop the habit of looking beyond the date. Don't simply ask, is this an old coin? Ask, is this coin unusually well preserved? Does it have an exceptional strike? Are the Monticello steps complete? Is there a genuine mint error? Could this be a coin that deserves professional examination? Those questions can turn an ordinary coin hunt into a fascinating numismatic investigation. So, coin hunters, what have we learned about the 1997 D. Jefferson nickel in fine condition? First, this is a genuine United States 5-cent coin produced at the Denver Mint, with a substantial mintage of approximately 466.64 million pieces. Second, an ordinary fine condition example is not normally a high-dollar rarity. Its circulated condition and large mintage mean that collectors should keep their expectations realistic. But third, the 1997 D has a fascinating condition rarity story. Exceptionally preserved examples with the full steps designation can be much scarcer, particularly at the highest grades. PCGS describes MS66FS examples as very scarce and MS67FS examples as even scarcer. And finally, the auction market demonstrates the potential of extraordinary specimens. A certified 1997 D MS67 full steps Jefferson nickel brought approximately $3,249.96 in a documented 2018 sale. So if you have a worn 1997 D. Jefferson nickel, don't assume that it is worth thousands of dollars. Instead, examine it carefully, learn how grading works, check the Monticello steps, and look for genuine varieties or mint errors. The real lesson is that a coin's value is determined by a combination of rarity, condition, strike quality, certification, collector demand, and actual market results, not simply by the year printed on the coin. If you enjoyed this journey into the 1997 D. Jefferson nickel, stay tuned for more United States coin discoveries, rare dates, mint marks, condition varieties, and fascinating auction market stories. Keep searching your coins, keep learning, and always look twice before spending an interesting nickel. Last and final coin, the 1990 D. Jefferson nickel, a 5-cent coin featuring the famous portrait of Thomas Jefferson and the historic Monticello building on the reverse. The particular coin in today's discussion is described as being in very fine condition, meaning it has circulated and shows noticeable wear, but important details of the original design are still visible. At first glance, a 1990 D. Jefferson nickel may look like an ordinary 5-cent coin. And for the vast majority of circulated examples, that is exactly what it is. The 1990 D had a very large reported mintage of approximately 663,938,503 coins. So the ordinary circulated issue is not rare simply because it is more than 3 decades old. But there is a much more interesting side to this coin. While circulated examples generally have very little premium, exceptionally preserved 1990 D. Jefferson nickels can attract considerably more attention. The biggest difference comes from condition, strike quality, and the presence of full steps on Monticello. Professional market records show that an exceptional 1990 D can bring substantially more than 5 cents. PCGS lists an auction record of $1,093 for an MS-66 example, while Gainesville Coins also identifies $1,093 as the auction record for the issue. So, could the very fine 1990D nickel in your hand be worth $1,000? Normally, no, but that does not mean you should ignore it. Today's story is about understanding exactly why some 1990D Jefferson nickels are ordinary pocket change, while extraordinary examples can become serious collector coins. The Jefferson nickel was introduced in 1938, replacing the Buffalo nickel as America's 5-cent coin. The design was created by sculptor Felix Schlag, who placed Thomas Jefferson's portrait on the obverse in Jefferson's Virginia home, Monticello, on the reverse. The Jefferson nickel became one of the most recognizable denominations in American coinage. Generations of Americans have encountered these coins in pocket change, cash registers, coin jars, and old collections. By 1990, the Jefferson nickel design had already been circulating for more than 50 years. The basic appearance remained familiar, with Jefferson on the front and Monticello on the back. The D Mint mark on the 1990D identifies the Denver Mint. The coin was struck using the standard copper-nickel composition of approximately 75% copper and 25% nickel. It has a diameter of approximately 21.2 millimeters and a weight of about 5 grams. PCGS lists the 1990D mintage at 663,938,503 coins. That enormous production figure is important when discussing rarity. A large mintage means that the ordinary 1990D is readily available. Nemista also records more than 663 million examples and shows relatively low values for ordinary examples in circulated and lower uncirculated grades. Therefore, the 1990D is not a classic rarity like a famous low mintage early Jefferson nickel. Its potential interest comes primarily from condition rarity and exceptional examples. Let's begin with the obverse, or front, of the coin. At the center is the familiar left-facing portrait of Thomas Jefferson. Around the portrait are the inscriptions, "I in God we trust," "Liberty," and the date 1990. Directly beneath the date is the small D Mint mark, confirming that the coin was produced at the Denver Mint. When examining a very fine example, the portrait should still be recognizable, although circulation will have softened some of the finer details. The date and mint mark should remain identifiable, making them especially important when authenticating the coin. Below Jefferson's portrait are the initials FS, representing Felix Schlag. The reverse features the famous Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia estate. Around the building are the inscriptions United States of America, E Pluribus Unum, Monticello, and 5 cents. For Jefferson nickel collectors, Monticello is more than just a historic building. It is also an important grading feature. Look closely at the steps beneath Monticello. On a superbly struck and well-preserved Jefferson nickel, these steps can remain sharply defined and separated. Coins with sufficiently complete step detail may receive the full steps, or FS, designation from a professional grading service. The 1990D has a particularly interesting full step story. Gainesville Coins describes the issue as common in grades without full steps, but scarce in MS-65 to MS-66 full steps. However, remember that today's example is described as very fine. A circulated VF coin should not be confused with a high-grade mint state full-step specimen. The high-dollar examples discussed in auction records are dramatically different from an ordinary worn coin. Now let's talk about rarity. The ordinary 1990D Jefferson nickel is not rare in circulated condition. With more than 663 million produced, there are many examples available. Nemista lists the 1990D mintage at 663,938,503 and shows relatively low values for ordinary circulated examples. So why would collectors still examine this coin? The answer is condition rarity. Millions of coins were produced, but far fewer survive in exceptionally high grades with excellent surfaces and strong strikes. As coins circulate, they collect scratches, dents, stains, contact marks, and wear. Many also lose some of the sharpness of the Monticello steps. That means a coin can be common overall but scarce in a particular grade. The 1990D is an excellent example of this concept. Gainesville Coin states that the coin is common without full steps and becomes scarce in MS65, MS66 full steps. PCGS also separately catalogs the 1990 D5C FS variety and identifies it as a distinct collectible category. For collectors building high-grade Jefferson nickel sets, these differences can be very important. A common date in ordinary condition may have little collector premium, while a spectacular coin with exceptional preservation and a rare strike characteristic can attract competitive bidding. This is why experienced collectors do not judge a coin simply by asking how old it is. They look at the complete combination of date, mint mark, grade, surfaces, strike, variety, and collector demand. Now we reach the question everyone wants answered. How much is a 1990 D Jefferson nickel worth? For the specific coin described in this video, a very fine 1990 D Jefferson nickel, the realistic answer is modest. USA Coin Book's current value information shows an estimated range beginning around 30 cents and extending to about $3.36 or more for uncirculated examples, while its displayed grade chart begins assigning a value at the uncirculated level. Gainesville Coins is even more conservative for circulated grades, listing face value for very fine, extremely fine, and about uncirculated examples. Namista likewise shows very low values for ordinary 1990D examples in circulated grades. So if your 1990D nickel is genuinely very fine and circulated, it would be misleading to claim that the ordinary coin is worth hundreds or thousands of dollars. The value can increase substantially when we move into exceptional mint state condition. APMEX's current guide lists values rising through the uncirculated grades, reaching much higher levels for extremely high-grade examples. PCGS records an auction result of $1,093 for a 1990 D Jefferson nickel graded MS66, sold through Heritage Auctions on December 13, 2004. PCGS also lists a separate auction record of $525 for an MS68 example, with that particular result occurring on eBay in 2023. These results demonstrate something very important. The big money examples are exceptional high-grade coins, not ordinary, very fine specimens. The full steps designation deserves special attention because it is one of the most interesting characteristics associated with Jefferson nickels. The steps on Monticello can suffer from weakness during the striking process. Even a coin that looks attractive overall may not have fully defined steps. For collectors pursuing high-grade Jefferson nickels, complete and sharply separated steps can make an enormous difference in desirability. Gainesville Coins reports that the 1990D full steps issue has an auction record of approximately $45 for an MS66 FS example, with price guide figures around $3 for MS61 FS, $6 for MS63 FS, and $26 for MS65 FS. This is an important detail because it shows that full steps does not automatically mean thousands of dollars. The market depends on the combination of grade and strike quality. In fact, Gainesville Coins notes the unusual situation that the highest recorded auction price for the 1990D was achieved by an example without the full steps designation. That is a perfect reminder that collectors should examine the complete coin rather than assuming that one characteristic automatically determines the value. Auction market and big value potential. The auction market gives us a fascinating picture of the 1990D Jefferson nickel. On one side, we have ordinary circulated examples that are generally worth around face value or a small premium. On the other side, we have extraordinary certified coins that can command hundreds or even more than $1,000. The documented $1,093 MS66 auction record is particularly interesting because it shows what can happen when a common modern-date Jefferson nickel reaches exceptional quality. PCGS's separate full steps information also confirms that the 1990D has a recognized FS variety, with exceptional examples receiving special attention from collectors. But viewers should be careful with viral coin value claims. If someone says, every 1990D Jefferson nickel is worth $1,000, that is simply not supported by the market evidence. A more accurate statement is that exceptional certified examples have achieved much higher prices than ordinary circulated coins. This distinction makes the story more believable and, more importantly, helps new collectors understand how the coin market actually works. If you have a 1990 Jefferson nickel, begin by checking the date carefully. Make sure it reads 1990 and look beneath the date for the D mint mark. Next, examine the overall condition. A very fine coin should show noticeable circulation wear, but the major design elements should remain clear. Turn the coin over and inspect Monticello. Look at the building, columns, lettering, and especially the steps. If the coin is genuinely very fine, don't expect perfectly sharp, full steps. However, if you believe the coin is much better preserved than initially thought, it deserves a closer examination. Use a magnifying glass or loupe under good lighting. Look for unusual doubling, die cracks, clips, off-center striking, or other possible mint-made abnormalities. Be careful, though. Scratches, dents, corrosion, staining, and other damage that happened after the coin left the mint are not automatically valuable errors. Another extremely important rule is never clean your collectible coins. Do not use toothpaste, metal polish, abrasive materials, chemicals, or household cleaners. Cleaning can permanently damage the original surface and reduce collector appeal. If you believe your coin might be an exceptional mint state specimen, professional certification could be considered. But for a normal, very fine coin, grading fees would generally not make economic sense. Finally, always compare your coin with actual auction results and reputable price guides rather than sensational online advertisements. An asking price is not the same thing as a completed sale. The real attraction of the 1990 Jefferson nickel is not that every example is rare. The attraction is that it demonstrates one of the most important principles in numismatics. Condition can create rarity. More than 663 million 1990 nickels were produced. That makes the ordinary issue readily available. But the number of coins that survive today at the highest grades with excellent surfaces and exceptional strikes is dramatically smaller. This is why collectors search through old coin jars, rolls, collections, and pocket change. They are not necessarily expecting every coin to be valuable. They are searching for the unusual specimen that stands apart from the millions of ordinary examples. And that is what makes coin hunting so exciting. A 5-cent coin can look completely ordinary at first glance, but its condition, strike, and certification can tell a very different story. So, coin hunters, what have we learned about the 1990 Jefferson nickel in very fine condition? First, it is a genuine Denver Mint Jefferson nickel with a large mintage of approximately 663,938,503 pieces. Second, an ordinary very fine example is not normally a high-dollar rarity. Current market references generally place circulated examples around face value or only modestly above it. But third, the 1990 becomes much more interesting in exceptional condition. High-grade examples, especially those with strong strikes and desirable characteristics, can attract serious collector attention. And finally, documented auction results prove that exceptional specimens can bring substantial money. PCGS records a $1,093 auction result for an MS-66 1990 Jefferson nickel, while its records also show a $525 MS-68 result. So if you have a 1990 Jefferson nickel in very fine condition, don't assume you have a $1,000 coin. Instead, appreciate it as a piece of American coinage history, examine it carefully, and learn what separates ordinary circulated examples from truly exceptional collector coins. Check the date. Check the D mint mark. Study Jefferson's portrait. Turn the coin over and examine Monticello. Look closely at the steps. Search for genuine mint errors and varieties. And above all, never clean the coin. Because the greatest lesson from the 1990 Jefferson nickel is simple. The date alone doesn't create the value. Rarity, condition, strike quality, preservation, collector demand, and documented auction performance all work together to determine what a coin is really worth. If you enjoyed this journey into the 1990 Jefferson nickel, make sure to stay tuned for more United States coin discoveries, rare dates, mint marks, condition varieties, and fascinating auction market stories. Keep checking your coins, keep learning, and never underestimate what you might discover in an old collection or a handful of change. Thanks for watching, and remember, sometimes the smallest details on a 5-cent coin can make the biggest difference in the collector market.